Hello everyone and welcome to Govinda's Garden. My name is Lee, and in this video we're going to take a deep dive into the anatomy of a fig cutting. Let's begin with the node. So the node is a kind of the bumpy part of the cutting, and it consists of two things. One is the leaf scar. This is where the stem of a leaf grew. Above the leaf scar is a bud, particularly an axillary bud. A bud has the potential of becoming either a new branch or a fig. Whenever you're rooting your cuttings, it's always important to orient them correctly. So always make sure that the leaf scar is on the bottom and the bud is on the top. I like to imagine the node as a face, and on the bottom is an open mouth smiling, and then above the mouth is the bud. Speaking of bud, there are two types of buds. One, as I mentioned, is the axillary bud, and there's also the terminal bud. Think termination. This bud is at the very tip of the branch where the branch terminates. The section of the cutting in between each node is called the internode. This is the area in which the roots are most likely to develop. The small little bumps that you can see on the exterior of the branch are called lenticels. Lenticels are kind of like the pores of the skin of the branch. They're involved in the transferring of oxygen and carbon dioxide from the outside and the inside. If you've ever rooted your cuttings in water, you can really see the lenticels start to grow and expand. And sometimes you can even see little bubbles coming off of the lenticels. This is carbon dioxide exiting out of the cutting and bubbling up through the water. I used to think that roots grew from the lenticels, but that's usually not the case. The roots typically will start growing in between the nodes in that internode section. I find it effective to wound the cutting or scar the cutting, and that basically means taking a sharp object and cutting a piece of the cutting off, and this seems to be effective in stimulating root growth. Like in this picture, you can see some roots that grew straight from the wound. When you're taking or purchasing cuttings, it's a good idea to make sure that they have at least 3 nodes on them. This way you can bury the first internode or the lowest internode into the soil, and that's likely where the roots will grow. And then the internode above it allows an opportunity for growth of branches, leaves, and fruit. Let's talk a little bit about lignification. Lignification is essentially the hardening of the cutting. As you can see in this cutting, which was taken from the terminal end of the branch, it's quite green and it's soft and pliable. You could say that this section of the branch has not been lignified, or it hasn't been hardened. Further down on the branch, closer towards the ground, the branches will be more rigid. They will have lignified. Lignification or hardening helps keep moisture inside of the cutting. It is possible to propagate trees from cuttings that are not lignified, but it takes a little more work because they tend to dry out easier and require some humidity and special care. Whereas with hardened cuttings or lignified cuttings, the cell walls are rigid, so the moisture remains inside, and they typically tend to be easier to start developing roots. Not only does lignification keep moisture inside of the cutting, but it also gives a stronger foundation. When the cutting grows roots and starts to develop leaves and branches and fruit, it needs to be hard and strong. So for that case, it's better to try to root and establish a tree from a lignified and rigid cutting. Just as a tree branch grows taller, it also grows wider. Cuttings taken from the lower end of the branch tend to be thicker than ones at the terminal end. Part of the lignification process not only means hardening, but adding girth to the tree. Right here we're looking at two cuttings side by side, one from the terminal end on the left and one from a more lignified, closer to the roots part of the tree on the right. The greenish colored ring that wraps around the circumference of the cutting is called the cambium layer. This is kind of the active layer of the cutting that is expanding outward. As the cambium layer expands outward, it creates hardened wood on the inside and adds more girth or width to the branch. A sign of a healthy cutting, looking at it from this perspective, would have a cambium layer on the outside of the perimeter of the cutting, as well as a good amount of condensed wood in between the cambium layer and the core of the tree. I hope you found this video helpful, and I wish you the best success in your fig growing adventures. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and leave your questions or comments down below. I'll see you next time.